Hi there, I wanted to just do a quick update on the new World Health Organization air quality guidelines in 2021. This is a big update. There's some really interesting changes in these guidelines, and we just want to explore the impact and also look at a site where we've tried to understand what the impact could look like for organizations that are looking to stick to these new guidelines. So first up, what are these guidelines? Well, the World Health Organization first put out standards in 2005. They've become a really important reference tool now around the world. Different nation states have actually adopted standards based off this. So these new 2021 guidelines, we've waited 15, 16 years now for these guidelines to come out. We'd expect to see revisions across the world, really, in their national standards. Might not happen immediately, but certainly it's something that we're expecting to see come soon. So why now? Why 2021? What's the cause? What's the catalyst? In short, it's just what we know about the risks of air pollution and the dangers that it can potentially cause. PM2.5 especially has been highlighted as a theme, really, by the WHO as one of the most dangerous pollutants. There's a range of different associated risks linked to PM2.5. Given this deepening evidence around the risks, especially with COVID-19, there's a great study from Harvard around the link between exposure to air pollution and the outcomes or the likely outcomes of unfortunately passing away due to COVID-19. So really, when you're seeing that kind of data, you're seeing that kind of evidence, it really becomes quite critical to actually act. These are the guidelines as of 2021. Go into them in a bit more detail, but I'm just putting this up as a reference. The ones that we'll really be focusing on is the particulate matter, PM2.5, PM10, and nitrogen dioxide, NO2. The other three I don't think are quite as critical. Here you go, here's the change. So what we're looking at here is different periods. So they might be set on an annual, they might be set on a 24-hour or even a shorter time duration period. 2005 limits and the updated limits. There's some really big reductions here, 3 to 4 times tighter restrictions, 75 to 50% changes in the standards. So pretty significant stuff. I want to just drill down actually into the notable changes. So PM2.5, we're seeing big reductions there in the annual and 24-hour limits. And this is critical because of the health impacts we've just talked about. And that's why those standards have really, really dropped and come quite far down. In NO2 as well, what we're actually seeing is a new NO2 limit, which is, we certainly believe, one of the most interesting elements to come out of all of this. So previously we had an annual and a 1-hour limit. Well, now we also have a 24-hour limit, and that 24-hour limit is very tight. So that will be a really interesting one to look at and potentially consider the impact of that there. PM3.5 and NO2, principally these are both emissions linked to transport. So transport here is going to be a big impact on transportation, especially within cities. Also places like construction sites, they're going to be pretty impacted by these changes. But what are the consequences for some of the groups in the UK here? So local authorities, they really own the problem at a local level. They look at standards such as this. So so local authorities really need to review and look to see if they need to revise the current policies. We've got clean air zones, clean air management zones, a range of different initiatives in place. Do they now need to consider the WHO limits, and what are they going to do about them? Equally, the UK Environment Bill, this is a really interesting one, especially the timing. Just to give a bit of an update, in case you're not aware, so the UK government was looking to set a target for 2030, we believe, around PM2.5. It's really targeting out PM2.5 as the critical one to actually manage here. The suggestion within Parliament and between the Lords in the debate was to adopt the WHO limit. This was kickstarted in 2020, so they were looking at the 2005 guideline. That was their reference guideline. It's going to be quite interesting how they approach this piece of legislation going forward. I would suggest there's probably 3 different approaches that could be taken. Number 1, simply put, you adopt the new guidelines put out by the WHO. It feels unlikely, just given the resistance at the moment about even adopting the WHO. It's possible, but it feels unlikely. Number 2 is that you keep the 2005 limit as was suggested. Now, the problem here is, what's the justification for that? The WHO have essentially said, hey, this 2005 limit, it's no longer good enough. There's a bunch of new evidence in place. We don't believe that this is enough. So where's the justification the UK government actually adopt this? That's, I think, going to be a really big challenge. And I think a third approach could potentially be to de-link away from the WHO standards and actually for the UK government to set out its own limit value. But then, of course, you're going to need the scientific evidence and the data to actually back that up. So it's going to be an interesting one, and we'll be definitely keeping our eyes on it to see in what direction we believe they're going. Finally, actually, what we wanted to do is go, okay, this is all really interesting, but what's the impact actually going to be? So we took just a random site that we're working on at the moment. It's a pretty good, typical example of, an average site, a reasonably high volume of transport coming in and out in the capital. What's the impact going to be? First of all, just going through them. So the top graph there is PM10. As you can see, that we do actually have a tighter limit on PM10, but it's only a 5% drop. So the data is just showing that, there's a little bit of a problem there, but nothing too much to worry about. You're still within compliance. It's only when you look at the PM2.5 graph that you see the potential problem that's coming in place. Now, so you can see there on the 28th of June, there was actually one day that was over the exposure limit, or at least the 2005 exposure limit. Now the problem is much bigger. We've got the 27, 28, 29 that are all considered highly exposed in breach of these guidelines. Suddenly the problem you can see there becomes much more significant. So sites that are looking to reduce pollution, all of a sudden the job has gotten a lot tougher. But I think it's really in NO2 concentration that the story really, you can really see what's going on. So as we mentioned before, this 24-hour average concentration, it didn't exist before. So we've got no baseline to where this perhaps should have been. But of course, the real worry here is we're seeing almost every day is above the limit. And that's a big concern. Talking about 2 weeks of data here, almost every day is above the acceptable limit, with a few exceptions where it only just mildly comes down. So that's going to be a big issue, something that really organizations need to be looking at, need to be reviewing, and needing to understand how are we going to manage and tackle this. So before I let you go, I just want to give you a quick introduction to MSOL and exactly what we're looking to do and how we actually believe we can help organizations that are thinking now, how do we tackle these new guidelines? So MSOL provides a targeted pollution monitoring platform, really first of its kind in that regard, that allows organizations to take simple steps to reduce pollution. The two benefits or features that I really want to focus on for this are the ability of targeted pollution monitoring. So identifying the specific and exact cause of pollution. So if you have a vehicle on site, you can evidence it to that vehicle. So if you consider what's going on here, especially in these graphs, you can see here there's a problem. You can see NO2 is running wild at the site, but I, as a site manager, as someone in that business, I can see the problem, but I don't know why. I don't know what the cause is. A site with many vehicles on, I really am left in the dark. And so by identifying the exact cause of pollution, really you're looking to say, hey, I know how to control this. There's specific vehicles, there's specific elements of the supply chain that are coming on that are causing the problems. And the second is an early warning notification. So an example of how this happens is a vehicle comes on site, causes a spike in pollution, and that alert gets sent out, notifying the people on the site, whoever needs to know, which then allows them to take much quicker action and actually evidence that they've taken positive steps to reduce pollution. And so you can just imagine, I think this graph here on the PM levels speaks volumes in terms of how that can help. If you're getting a message about potential pollution breach on the 27th of June, you know that you can take the steps that you need to do to reduce that and actually bring that down. And that is going to just be even more critical given these new guidelines. Because if you can prevent that peak on the 28th of June and say, hey, look, I took this piece of, I took this action and this was the resulting pollution, well, all of a sudden you're making sure that you're staying in compliance to these new guidelines and really just making sure that you're reducing your overall impact, whatever your goal might be, whether it's the guidelines, whether it's reducing scope 3 emissions, you're really saying, you're taking daily actions to actually stay in compliance. So that's everything. I hope the overview of the new guidelines was useful for you. If anyone is interested and wants to find out a little bit more, you're welcome to go to msol.io to check out the website, or feel free to send me an email. You can contact us on sales@msol.io. I hope this was useful. Thanks very much.